Let's rock it then.
Okay. Yeah. So, of all people to sort of find, as I said, I've interviewed um, musicians, photographers, videographers, and all sorts, but I wasn't expecting to find you. But then, Twitter led me to your book, which has a whole chapter dedicated to Tracy Chapman. Unexpected, but absolute joy to find you and get you in that seat right there and talking to me. So thanks for joining us.
Stefan, it's a joy. Genuinely, I've been looking forward to this since you first reached out. It's a joy to be with you.
Well, tell me a little first before we get into Tracy about Liverpool, because as I said, that was my uni town. It's the main city near where I grew up, really. So, how was that growing up under the I guess the shadow of Thatcher in a very liberal Labour town?
Yeah, I mean, a city so left wing that there were serious debates when I was growing up in the 80s about ceding from the rest of England and making Liverpool a socialist republic, which I thought would have been kind of amazing. Liverpool's a magnificent city. I was just there. I've just come back from being there with family for the first time since COVID. So first time in nearly 2 years, and God, it's an incredible city. It's always been an incredible city, but under Thatcher in the 1980s, when I was a kid, it was a dark time, and employment in the north of England was just incredibly high. There was a heroin epidemic. It was just just a cloud of hopelessness everywhere. Newcastle, Manchester, Leeds, these once great industrial cities of coal and cotton and wool, had lost their industrial, they had their heart ripped out of them in the post-war years. And Liverpool was the port city, once the greatest port in the world, but it had lost its meaning totally by the 1980s. And if you've seen Billy Elliot,
Yeah.
then you kind of know what the vibe was like. And I didn't have the ballet dancing moves of Billy Elliot, but like a lot of people in Liverpool, we had football and we had music. Those were the two ways we announced ourselves to the world. And when I was a kid, a lot of the way I made sense of the world was through music, but more than anything, a lot of the way I kind of sustained myself in a really dark time that's where life seemed to be lived in black and white, was by just devouring anything American I could get my hands on. The books, the music, the movies, the television, a knockoff pair of Ray-Bans,
Yeah.
the Chicago Bears. And I really did. I feasted on American culture, American soft power. And it kind of threw a sense of a world, a parallel universe where life could be lived in color. And I'd never been really much out of England, but I told myself this is how I survived, that I was just an American trapped in an Englishman's body.
That's interesting. I feel like it's the American dream, right? That you were sold.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote this book, Reborn in the USA, during lockdown when sports stopped and there was nothing to do, and nature abhors a vacuum. And I was in New York, in Manhattan, and then it was really the ground zero of coronavirus for just an awful dark period, and there was chaos and fear of the unknown. And you're right, it was a dream, and it was a child's dream. I had, when things were dark in Liverpool, I had the Statue of Liberty and the Manhattan skyline crudely painted on my bedroom wall. Be the last thing I'd look at every night. And it was a child's dream, and it was a dream. But for me, I made that dream real by moving here to that very city, New York. And that's very much what my book is about, trying to retrace in a time of dark awfulness, trying to retrace the steps, like the breadcrumbs through the enchanted forest in a fairy tale of how I'd gotten here, and to try and separate the dream from the reality and really explore the contours of the love of the United States, which has been, I guess, the organizing idea of my whole life.
It's interesting you say that. I think a lot of Tracy's work deals with the complex identity of the USA and how not only its history but also how it's presented and the reality. To quote across the lines, the back streets of America kill the dream of America. So,
bang, bang, bang.
Yeah, yes. When you got there, how was it? Did you immediately think, okay, we've made it, or was there an adjustment period? And what did it look like in reality?
Crazy adjustment period. I came at the earliest opportunity, right after university, and as an illegal alien, I came on a tourist visa and just overstayed.
Oh, right.
And part of the reason I wrote the book also was that when I did become American in 2018, one of the greatest days of my life, I tweeted my joy on the courthouse steps. And I just come from a room where, there's 200 and something other freshly minted new Americans from 63 countries, many of whom had crossed deserts, survived famines, survived civil wars to become American. The one thing we shared was the notion of America had given us strength and courage when we needed it. But I just survived a couple of late night beatings in the Liverpool chip shops, which didn't compare to what everybody else or many of my fellow new Americans had gone to. And it was beautiful and it was wonderful, but it took place in a time of culture war. When I tweeted out that, I've become American, the response was immense. I mean, immense. I tweeted why I wanted to become American. Tracy Chapman, very much part of that, in a Twitter thread, and then tweeted the photo of myself with my certificate of naturalization. And there was, there's a lot of, God, you did it the right way. You were legal. And I wasn't. I was an illegal alien. It's important to make that clear. But the beginning, it was like the first half of Scarface for me, coming here in the way that I did, but without the axes in the shower scene. And so it's been a long climb. I mean, really what you're getting at, and I wrote the book during COVID that then went into the Black Lives Matter summer, and the agony and the trauma of that, and then into the toxicity of the election. And so essentially what I've learned to do is to realize that my dream was a child's dream and a child's love. And child's love is very pure, very heartfelt, but is fairly infantile. And an adult love, if any of your listeners are in love, or feel love or experience love, you realize, I think, as a grown-up, that love is bloody hard work. It's something you work at, and the object of your love, whatever that is, a person, sports team, a band, a nation, the object of your affection has strengths and has weaknesses. And part of being in love is committing to work hard, to revel in the former, work hard at the latter. The epigraph from my book is Dan Hughes' line, the great poet, "Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet and yet must be." And that's a discordance, but nothing is perfect in life. We all know that, apart from Tracy Chapman.
Well, it's funny you should say that. I think what brought me to this podcast even was my need to express that, that love, and to be thankful for someone who guided me through a dark and hard time. Like it's very similar to what you're saying. And I think, your quote, I attempted to write this book in a spirit of love, hope, and optimism, which you believe will prevail, is almost that is the message of Tracy Chapman's music. Ultimately, it's saying, look, this is happening, we need to change it. It's a call to arms almost in that sense. So I did see how you align with her on that level.
Yeah, I was changing. I mean, the way I hear her music has changed as I've changed. Like when I grew up in Liverpool, I fell in love with American music. Rolling Stone magazine, I'd send off for whatever albums they reviewed, whether I'd heard the bands or not. Bands that, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Guadalcanal Diary, Lone Justice, Boogie Down Productions, Jason and the Scorchers. There's a band, the Windbreakers, I listened to a lot when I was a kid because I got their album. I had no idea they weren't even big in America. Like the lead singer, one of his family members just reached out to me and sent me his autobiography, which starts, "No one has ever heard of the Windbreakers." They're one of the biggest bloody bands to me level. So I had, Husker Du, obviously the Talking Heads, the Replacements, Eric B and Rakim, but they all existed only in my imagination. I had no context to put them in. And when I first heard Tracy Chapman, who was introduced to me by a teacher who really was just like the one saving grace in a pretty, when I look at it, hilariously horrific old school education, Mr. McNally, he slipped me her cassette, which I still have here on my desk.
Is that the actual one?
I'd like to lie and say it was the actual cassette, but
No.
eBay's a wonderful thing.
That's eBay,
yeah. I bought many Tracy Chapman cassettes. I own multiple debut albums in multiple forms, and just even holding them or even looking at it. Yeah, you told me just before we started taping that you interviewed the photographer who shot that album cover. Yeah. It's an incredible image. Even just looking at it gives me strength when I need it. But I want to be clear, like when I first heard it, I agree with everything you're saying now. Understanding, the societal challenges in America in a more sophisticated way when I did as a kid. But when I first heard that Tracy Chapman cassette, first of all, it's one of the few albums that I heard first time, it just got hooked immediately. Normally I have to work at music and listen to the lyrics and really develop it. Few songs grab me the first time I hear them, but something in the tenderness, the honesty of her voice, the vulnerability, it almost feels like she's smoldering with such an intensity that she's in danger of burning up, but she has to get that truth out. It's like she has no choice but to sing it. And it was just, God, it was remarkable. And it was the emotional, the devastating purity of her sound. And talking about emotion was something we didn't do in England, still don't do in England to a large degree. More now, but it's like a tiny bit instead of not at all. And this human being articulating emotion, that was the power of it to me, articulating that in the here and now, and also the deep contrast to everything else. I mean, the massive album before that for me and for everybody else that was faintly audible across Britain at all times was probably Beastie Boys, The License to Ill. Yeah. And before that, everything was a kind of a harsh synth sound. So it was partially the emotional honesty and partially just the stripped down starkness, the way, so the message, the messenger, and the way it was delivered, that whole package, that's what struck me initially.
I think, it's interesting. She's almost in spite of any expectations. She's just saying, you know what, this is what I have. And if you look at when they were recorded and written, these songs, the demos and the rough takes go back to her uni days in the sort of early 80s. So she hasn't bended her sound or messaging for the record label, and she hasn't done anything in the sense of stripping back things which maybe are not going to work. She just says, this is what I have, and this is how it's going to be presented to the world. And I think
which is amazing. By the way, that's a way not just to record your debut album, that's a way to be in life. This is who I am, this is what I do, and this is how I do it. And it doesn't matter whether I'm at Tufts and I'm busking on the street, or whether I'm going into the studio for a lecture, I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is, for me, incredible. And I'm a fan of some of that synth pop that you mentioned also, but it's.
By the way, so am I. God, I listened to the Human League Dare for the first time in a while this year, and this week, and bloody hell, oh my God! All I'll say is I've gone down a wormhole, but we'll save that for your other podcast, Philoki, today. But also what was deeply inspiring to me was, as you hint, her life story, and that that rise the purity of her rise from street corner to the Nelson Mandela 70th birthday tribute concert, which I'm sure you talk about a lot on this podcast. But I remember watching that was also is still deeply imprinted on my retina. And I look at that on YouTube dozens of times a month, thinking about what courage it took for her. Everybody knows the story at this point, that she was just a minor act filler, but then Stevie Wonder's synthesizers had a malfunction, and so they just threw her on stage because she was acoustic in this Wembley Stadium, 72,000 drunk, confused English fans. They wanted to hear "I Just Called to Say I Love You." This is meant to be the pinnacle of the bloody broadcast, and instead they've been served up a 24-year-old unknown. And when you watch that, you see her in a signature black turtleneck on, just with an acoustic guitar, and you watch her walk on stage, and she does look afraid. And I've got to say, I was already a massive fan of Tracy Chapman. I already adored her. I played this. Yeah. Okay. I'd fallen in love with her. My English teacher, my economics teacher, had given me a CD. I actually, to this day, do not know how he found her. He was very into American music, really turned me on to a lot of, here's a Marquee Moon. I think you'll enjoy this. Here's Gil Scott-Heron. It was amazing. And, but I was terrified for her, and she seemed terrified. She knew what she was about to do. It was like being a gladiator walking out to face the lions, and she's tuning up, and you can hear, when you watch it on YouTube, there's an angry roar that crackles around Wembley. And I knew full well, and what our country fellows can do to people when they've had a couple of beers in them, and I was bloody terrified. Not to mention, there's an estimated 600 million people watching on television around the world, and I remember thinking, I do not know if I want to watch what's about to go down. It was a recipe for just not just disaster, but just evisceration. But then Tracy leans into that microphone, and then breaks out that opening riff to Fast Car. And she is nervous. You see her, you hear her voice. It grows in confidence. But at the beginning, she was, she needed a minute, but then she seemed to draw mystical strength from her own lyrics. And snapped into that mode that you've hinted at, where she's like, sod it, I'm singing my truth. I don't care what you think of it, which is also, as for a teen at that age, however old I was, that was one of the great lessons. Stop thinking about what other people think about you. Just do your bloody thing, and believe in it. And she quietened that whole bowl. That Wembley Bowl suddenly became like the most intimate, small, beautiful venue, just a magical, intimate setting. And she's overnight. Normally, when bands became massive, I also stopped liking them. I remember when Culture Club, I wrote this in my book, Culture Club. I was probably one of the only people to buy their first two singles. First was a disastrous flop. The second was amazing, but didn't break through. And then they did break through. They went to number one. And my mum was like, "Oh, it's your favorite band." I was like, I remember crying. They weren't mine anymore. I said to her, "They're the world's. They're not mine anymore." But something about Tracy, I was thrilled that she was the world's.
It's interesting that yes, we have chatted about that moment a few times on the podcast, but what we have never really looked at is from the angle of the angry, almost disinterested crowd, because it's, I haven't had many British people on for start, but yes, I do know what we can be like as crowds. So that's really interesting, and I think it's something she struggles with to this day. Almost is fame for fame's sake. She just isn't into that, and she doesn't like. Famously, she doesn't like interviews.
I said this to you before we came on. Thanks to my work, we have been able to interview pretty well everyone that I've ever wanted to interview. I've learned a lot about life, in the process.
Yeah.
And there's a short list of human beings that I am desperate to have on the show.
Yeah.
Philip Larkin,
Okay.
Primo Levi, both of whom will not be coming on anytime soon. Philip Larkin was the English poet,
Okay.
fairly awful human being by all accounts, but wrote some of the classic English sentiment.
Yeah.
They fuck you up, your mum and dad, they fuck you up, they do, they give you all the faults they had and add some extra just for you. But wrote some beautiful work, The Mower, about how we must be careful of each other, we must be kind while there is still time. And Primo Levi was an amazing Italian, a chemist who survived Auschwitz and wrote some of the most powerful writing on the human condition I've ever written. And also, sadly, is not with us. And Tracy Chapman's the third. That's like she's the one of the three that is living.
She's on a little bit of a hiatus at the moment, I guess you would say. 12 years. 12 years. And
I love that. I love the way you've Stefan, you hint that she's coming back.
Well, there's no news. She said that she's living a life in San Francisco happily. So I think if you look at from about 1988 through to 2008, when she released Our Bright Future, it was tour, album, promotion on a cycle for every single year of her life. I think she took maybe 2 years in between New Beginning and Telling Stories. So she's happy to be out of the spotlight. I think it suits her, and I think also she's out of a contract. So I think that's sort of speculation, but with sort of observations over the years and a few of the things she said. But I think she will come back. She is recording still in her own space, I guess, and she's still writing.
Well, what I will say is, the world is a place of incredible darkness, incredible chaos, incredible fear. The stakes couldn't be higher right now. And just that the world is a better place when Tracy Chapman speaks into it. And that's what I would say, is just to hear her ideas, her thoughts, her creativity, her emotion. The world is a better place when it has Tracy Chapman. Just even if it's just one, if it's just one song. Right now, it would make the world. It's a very rare currency. Truth. Right now, for Tracy to drop some would be.
You're not alone. You're not alone there. I mean, as I say on the social media, it's a question we get every day, and maybe tens, hundreds of times. And you mentioned Bang 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 earlier, and in a lot of ways, I feel like she might feel, and this is total guesswork, that she's written these songs. She's told us, Bang 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 is, you could completely overlay it onto the Black Lives Matter movement, and it is almost like it's been written for 2020. So
it's fair. I mean, it's very hard to rewrite the Bible, to keep dropping to dropping. Actually, I've written my thing. You guys can just keep interpreting it, and huge respect if that. I can actually buy that. She said, "I've said my thing. You guys just keep engaging with it. Keep asking the questions that I'm asking. Keep relating to the emotions that I'm demanding of you, dear listener, and that's the pathway I've set out, but I can add no more."
Were you in America for the Seth Meyers Talking About Revolution performance last year? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
How did that feel? Because I mean, it blew up on Twitter. It became, this cultural moment, really, for a woman who hasn't released anything in God knows how many years.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been talking about Tracy Chapman since we started broadcasting, which was 2010 World Cup. I talk about a lot, and so just I've noticed in general, to begin with, people engage with it as if it was a piece of kitsch. When I talk about my emotions and I talk about, I support Everton Football Club, and when they lose, which is a lot, I often will play fast cart right afterwards to remind myself that however bad it feels, there's always human beings who are in a lot more agony than I am, and I need to get on with it. Football, as Jurgen Klopp says, is the most important, least important thing. And so I talk about fast cart. And to begin with, it was like a forgotten moment of musical history, one that people felt deeply warm about it. But when you met, it's one of those things, when you mention it, people are more like, oh, I haven't thought about that in ages. And that's gone. I mean, the last 5 years, I think there's been a reappreciation of Tracy's work in general. She was kind of in I'd say in the beginning, 2010, when we started to talk about it, she's more in the Suzanne Vega kind of like the mists of time. Oh, I love that song. I love that song. I haven't heard that in ages. But something has happened. There has been a reappreciation in many forms. The cover, the perennial covers, and I don't know what your feelings. The covers of her work by other artists, like the Black Pumas and that kind of thing. I don't know what your position is, but like
I'm
to me,
purist, so.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, to me, it's like perfect already, and so you don't really try and.
I don't want your sketch of the Mona Lisa, is how I say it.
Yeah, it is. It's like I'm going to show you Roger Bennett's Michelangelo's David. I'm like, whoa. Exactly. That's just some plasticine. What are you doing? I mean, that's ultimately I can't stand them, but what it has done is I think led or triggered a reawakening, not just a remembrance. I think it's actually a whole new generation of just engaged with Tracy's work, which is bloody wonderful. And I think she has become a legend of the without doing very much on her part. Without doing very much on the American Time. I actually did an event with Seth Meyers last night, and I wish that this interview had happened 2 days ago, because then I could have asked him and got more insight into the hows and whys for you. I see her doing that show more as just a moment, just reaffirming a phenomenon that was already happening, which was just her moving her way back into the pantheon of American greats.
Yeah, and I think she also wanted just to say, look, I'm not with this circus that's going on in the background, and vote for without saying it, just vote for common sense, I guess. Before we go, tell me a little about the photograph in the background there to your left. This one, yeah.
Hey, that's a painting. It's great. God, you got a good eye. You are referring to, because I'm assuming most people are listening to this as a podcast. Yes, I'm actually in my studio, which is not unlike my childhood bedroom, which just had hundreds of American things, like the Chicago Bears, William Refrigerator Perry, and side by side with Michael Jordan dunking, and Pretty in Pink movie posters, and 10,000 Maniacs debut album, and Danny DeVito in Throw Mama from the Train, which is the poster I nicked from the cinema. Just junk, with Schlitz, beer cans, Budweiser bottles stuck up there. And you've spotted a painting which is over my left shoulder. When I released my book, the book is very much, it looks at the influences that made me love the United States of America. And I could try and break them down piece by piece, including starting at the beginning, things like Dynasty, they call it here, and Dallas, which was like, we watched Coronation Street, EastEnders, Brookside. Those are massive shows, working class misery in London, Liverpool, and Manchester, where the general value was, watch this. You think your life's crap? It's nothing compared to the misery these characters are experiencing. So shut the hell up. And
that is it. Yeah.
Yeah. Suddenly Dallas and Dynasty were like, no. Here's rich people. Their problems were about having too much money, too many oil wells, too many mink coats. And I was like, oh my God, I felt like aspiration for the first time. And so I broke down in the book the music, the Chicago Bears, when I first saw them, the Super Bowl season, it blew me away. Obviously, the John Hughes movies were deeply influential. Miami Vice, my God, a television show that was less about narcos in Miami in the 1980s and more a guide to a 14-year-old kid who didn't know anything about women, about how to try and affect a singularity and dare to be different, which genuinely meant wearing linen pants and no socks in Liverpool in the winter, which was not an advisable path.
We're
and
going
then
that way again. Sorry, but just
is that true? If you're wearing them, if you're wearing those as you're listening to it, I take it back. They look great on you. You look great. And then there's Tracy Chapman. And when I released the book, Reborn in the USA, which is a very humbling experience, dropping a book about my love of America and the contours of that love for an American audience. One of the first big features on it was in the Wall Street Journal. They did it in their Saturday review section. They put it on the front cover, and they came up with this piece of art, which is me with an Arby's beef sandwich, which I also wrote about in depth, surrounded by all my heroes that had made me want to be American, Tracy lead among them. And I loved the piece. And I dropped a line to the artist just to thank him for the piece. And he was beautiful. He's a football fan. He wrote back and then came up and gave me what tonight I thought was just a computer generated Robert Parada is his name. I thought it was just a computer generated image that the guy dashed off, probably 12 of them a day. Turned out it's a bloody oil painting. I couldn't believe it. It's
incredible.
Stunning. And there she is looking, I think it's straight off the YouTube video from the Mandela concert. And that's it. That is, God, that is really the inside of my head as a 15-year-old, that oil painting.
It does look like an exciting place to be fair. It does look, it's an aspirational place to be for sure.
I mean, I think everybody, Stefan, has their version of this. All your listeners will, and I'm sure if they're listening to this, the one constant for them, and there'll be many different, you'll have your own version with like a 15-year-old Stefan in Wales with different human beings there. This is mine. The one constant for listeners of your podcast is that Tracy will be in it. And God, we're all, a testament to how we're all much better off for her work, her creativity, and her poetry.
So, thank you so much for joining me, having the chat today. Just before you go, though, I ask everyone this, favorite song and why?
Oh, man, I just adore. It's got to be the first one I ever heard, and it's a cliche, but I can't lie and try and be different. I think Fast Car, which is the song I want to be played at my funeral as my casket is lowered into the ground. Right after Tears of a Clown. It's just, it's the first one I heard. It's the first time I'd really heard so much emotion compressed in to a song, and just a mesmeric guitar playing. But it's that, and it's amazing. I listen to a lot of music, and I go through a rhythm where I'll listen to it so much. There'll always be a moment where I've listened to it too much. Overplayed a song, and then the song almost immediately loses its power and its interest for me. And funnily enough, once it's broken, it's not like something I can just rest and then get back in. I can play it if it's broken, it's like a glass that's been smashed. I can not play that song for a couple of years, play again, but it's still broken. Once I've overplayed, I can never overplay Fast Car ever. It's one of the only songs. There's two or three others, but it's one of the only songs that I can play and play and play and play, and it never loses an iota of its power.
I think that's you summed it up beautifully when you said it's the single most human track that you've ever heard, and I think It has so much relevance to people's lives that I think someone famously said they felt like Tracy had been going through their trash and reading the mail. It's just that level of deep insight into the human psyche. But
by the way, the thing that's amazing when you say that is everybody feels that, and that's a testament to its brilliance. Is that everybody, no matter where they are, across America, you in North Wales, me in Liverpool, across the globe, many perspectives, people who understand the issues that she's talking about, people who don't understand. It is just an incredible human canvas that everybody projects their own meaning in, and that's ultimately the true power and the true legacy of all of it. Can I just say before I go, I think it's amazing that you do this. You're a wonderful madman. It's like I can't tell how much I was looking forward to doing this. You are a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful bloke for doing all that you do and sustaining. I mean, in Tracy's what word did you use? Hiatus. I love that. It assumes it projected she's in Tracy hiatus. For you to do this and just keep stoking the fire of love and joy and truth and human wonder. It's an amazing thing you do. It's just a testimony to how wide, how broad, how just how seismic her impact's been.
I think also and this is maybe me blowing my own trumpet, but sometimes you need to. I think it's the power of passion as well, isn't it? Like it's the power for if you've got a joy and a passion for something and you follow it, you can literally work with anyone or on anything that you want. So I think that's a message which people need to hear more, and I think that's what you definitely
I love all that. I could not agree. If anything has been a motif, I mean, tenacity and passion, I think are the two great values. You're a beautiful human being. I'm so grateful and genuinely completely tickled to be on this, and it's been magic.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure on my end as well. Have an amazing day. Thank you very much again.
Same to you. Cheers.